let me start by, saying that, Mr. Jitu Mishra talked about the university. I'll just quickly say a few things about the business school, being the dean of the, Jindal Global Business School. Now, JGBS is an experiment, I would say. We started 2010. The university obviously started in 2009. So that makes us a very young school. But, I must say that in a very short period of time, Jindal Global Business School has now come to the forefront, is now one of the major, B schools in the country. To make a very short sort of, summary of what the B school, stands today. In terms of our research output, in terms of our, the faculty base, the full-time faculty members, in terms of the kind of international opportunities we provide to our students, in terms of the entire ecosystem, that we provide, JGBS certainly has proved its mettle. Just to give you some statistic, in terms of our research output, we are number 2 compared to all the 20 IIMs. We are ahead of all the top private business schools, including, the ISB, the IMT, the MDI. In terms of our full-time faculty members, the quality, the quantity, Mr. Jitu Mishra, Professor Sani talked about, the kind of faculty members we hire. We are, again, one of the largest B schools in the country. We are, again, compared to all the IIMs and the private B schools. But more importantly, most of the, and, I hope, and I'm certainly, you would agree that most of the B schools in the country, the prominent ones at least, they are, almost all of them, they are standalone B schools. Now, JGBS as part of a university, is something unique that is, competing head-on with most of the big names in the Indian business education landscape. Coming quickly over to the topic of this particular session of upskill to upscale, the nature of the future workforce, it's very topical. And it's especially of strategic importance to a country like India. I'll just put some stats here just to set the context, and then I'll come over to the panel, the esteemed panelist members who are here. If you look at the population of India, right? I mean, you're talking about 1.3 billion, 130 crores, upwards of that. We're going to soon pay China in about 10, 15, 20 years. Now, that population base, when we talk about the demographic dividend, 2/3 of that is below the age of 35. So approximately around 850 million, 83 crores, people below age of 35, which we can count the young workforce. Just to put that number into perspective, that number, the number of young people in India is more than twice the total population of United States of America, the largest economy in the world, right? The young population of India is more than the population of all the G7 countries combined. In fact, 100 million more. So we are talking about a huge number. And that brings us to the question that, with such a large set of people, I'm just trying to, build a connect with upskilling. They will prove to be a major sort of a variable when we talk about increasing the size of the economy from, 3.5 trillion currently to 5 trillion, 10 trillion, 20 trillion tomorrow. Now, there are 2-3 aspects here. One thing, of course, is that this young population needs to be given jobs, because this demographic dividend and between demographic, complete tragedy, we just need to make sure that we are right side of the history, right? So one thing, of course, this young population needs to be given jobs, and for that, they need to be skilled properly, and therefore the role of the universities and colleges in India. The other aspect is that the nature of the skills is changing very rapidly, right? With this technology, a lot of, the previous panel talked in length about how technology affects the kind of jobs, the business models, the organizations that are coming up. So the nature of the skills in itself is changing, at least, part of it. And then, of course, we have a limited window for this demographic or the so-called demographic dividend. It goes for another 25, 30 years. After that, what is expected that the absolute number of people in the young population bracket is going to come down. So, this will not stay forever with a country like India. So it's important to skill them. It's important to find jobs. It's important that the economy grows to make sure, we are able to build that connect. So on that note, let me, just quickly come to our panel members, and I will request them to, maybe if they can introduce them one by one, and also give their opening remarks when we're talking about upskill to upscale. What's the relevance? What are the skills we're talking about? And how these skills are changing with, the rapidly changing external environment. So, I'll start with Mr. Abhishek Gulyani, who's the CEO of Hill and Knowlton Strategies. Mr. Abhishek.
I think from an opening perspective, so our comms industry comes slightly different, right? We didn't go through this whole, we were actually on the other side during COVID. We were struggling to get talent. In fact, we were at a industry level having conversations about how not to hire from each other and how to get more talent in. So we were struggling for talent during the time of COVID. And salaries were skyrocketing, so it was becoming a big problem in terms of how, in fact, we were having conversations about how much increase to give. So it was reaching that kind of a point where we're having conversations about not poaching from each other and things. But that brings to the second point where I think there are two parallels that are running that is important for us to understand. The first one being that there is a cultural shift that's happening where organizations need to cope up with that, right? Where Gen Zs and millennials are getting real in terms of their expectations from organizations. In fact, I was reading somewhere where they said that if you actually pick up a CEO from the 1950s and place him here now, he'll pretty much be able to run the organization again. So the thinking of organizations has actually not changed as per what the demands of talent is in the current work environment. Some organizations are beginning to do it, but I think at the comms level, we're beginning to have those conversations now. And therefore, concepts like ideas over hierarchies, are you giving an equitable environment for all your employees to grow, and then aspects of trust, transparency, collaboration are becoming even more important now. That brings to the second part of, and I'll stay specific to the comms industry, right? If you look at the history of communications, and I'm going to speak between PR and advertising, we started with having a mic and saying, here are the USPs of a mic, right? Then we got into saying, oh, the mic can do wonders. So we started speaking about emotional content of a mic. Then the brand ambassadors came in. Then social media came in. You started seeing mic advertising on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and things like that. But that's changing now again. There is AI and metaverse that's becoming real in conversations. Within our group of WPP, we are doing metaverse launches for brands and things like that, and looking at metaverse integrations on products and brands that could happen. Now, is that talent available? No. Is there an opportunity? Yes. And I think there is a greater opportunity today for us to partner with institutes like yours and educational institutes across to make that point. And the last one that I want to talk, which I feel is very important, is that I think there is an equitable, which I think we were discussing outside also, there is a need for equitable diversification of how we look at institutes. COVID pushed it. A lot of the tech companies started going to tier 2, tier 3 towns to hire. We started doing it. We've still done it less, but I think there's a greater opportunity for us to now start looking at just not to get me wrong, but tier 2 towns, as they may say, to start hiring from there, because I mean, it was an eye-opener of what you guys spoke about in terms of what you guys are doing and talent that's coming in. I don't have knowledge of this, and I don't know if the panelists have that knowledge, and that is an opportunity.
So I'm Rupesh Tripathi. I head HR for KPMG's captive in India, KPMG Global Services. And in the start of the session, when Dr. Shani was here, and every time he would refer to HR
He's still here.
Oh, there he is. Every time, sir, you were referring to HR professionals, you would look at me. I was wondering why. Now I realize after 2 panels, I'm the only HR representative in this HR conclave. So I almost feel obliged to maybe say 2 words about HR as a profession. Now, obviously, Dr. Shani spoke about how HR is seen as a cost center by many leaders. How do employees perceive it? So here's a riddle for you. So this one employee who's walking through the forest, is getting dark, getting scary. He suddenly has these 2 creatures in front of him. There's a really ferocious tiger, and there's an HR manager. He happens to be carrying a gun with just 2 bullets. Who do you think is going to shoot first? Tigers, show of hand.
Nobody.
There you go. Well, the answer is he's going to shoot the HR manager twice to be sure.
You should have asked them, individually. People won't answer.
No, but I think HR has come a long, long, long way. In fact, 3 years back when I was being hired, my CEO calls me, who's my boss. He tells me, know one thing, I'm going to be talking to you more than what your wife does. And he stayed true to it. I think we have truly become partners, collaborators, advisors in a way to business. I think HR's voice is as much, if not more today, on not just people agenda, but also on the business agenda on what way to go. We heard about Jeetu talking about how Jindal University has gone to where it has gone to just because of its people. So that was a little bit on HR. So guys, whoever here amongst the students are looking at HR as a career, it still continues to be as shiny as ever. In terms of specific, your question or opening remarks on skilling, I think, again, Dr. Shani spoke about 90s being the time for competencies, then it became engagement, 2010s was around consciousness, 2020s is all about skills. I think that's what's in the forefront. The way things are changing, and we heard some of that in the previous panel around Industry 4.0, there is no way to stay relevant unless somebody continues to reinvent them. And obviously that's where academia comes in, corporates come in. Last year we had 1 million learning hours in my organization. This year I think we are going to be growing by another 40% on what we are doing in that space. There was this very interesting LinkedIn post that I saw. There was a job post which said a particular technology said we need experience of 5 years. And somebody shared that job saying that I invented this technology 2.5 years back. That's the reality, right? You learn something, you think that you are getting there, and the technology is obsolete, or that skill is obsolete before you know it. So for us to be able to benefit out of that twice the US population, which is our future, I think this partnership of what academia and industry can do, and how do we instill the self-learning in our population so that they continue to learn and reinvent themselves is going to be the key.
To answer your first question in terms of chief happiness officer, I think it is important for any organization to build and work on a culture, which is the culture which brings happiness and a coherent workspace. And I think my role has been, apart from being the managing director in the organization, my role has been very critical in terms of working along with people and working with building the culture and brand of the organization. So I think it's more about how people react to a particular situation, understanding that it's about the emotional connect and building that culture of trust and transparency like we've been talking about. So that has been my critical role here. And coming to our the topic for the panel, of course, when we talk about, I think Abhishek shared points about comms industry, and coming from comms industry, our focus is generally building, talent, and also looking out for talent who is more, there are a couple of aspects to it, who's not just emotionally, not just IQ intelligent, is also emotionally intelligent in terms of there is creative thinking aspect to it, there is adaptability, there is collaboration, and there is a team spirit, there is a enthusiasm and passion to learn and adapt, apart from having that EQ value. I think after post-pandemic, all of us have evolved over a period of time, that it is not just the technical skills that we are looking at. We are looking at how to collaboratively work with each other, how to adapt to a situation which suddenly evolves. You know, like from suddenly working from office, we had to adapt to a situation where everybody had to sit at home and work. And it was a very different style of working for all of us. And with the agility, I think we all transformed into it. That was the role of the leaders, and that is what we work towards, building our teams and colleagues and help them evolve with that. I think to begin with, most important, what I look for a person in a person is more about, you know, how the person comes up with a passion to creatively think and to collaborate with team, and has that enthusiasm and passion to build the role that he's been hired for.
I've been a journalist for most of my life, and I will still consider myself a journalist for most of the day. I've written on technology, almost my entire career. I still enjoy doing it. Don't get the time, so I have Upskill to do a podcast. I was I was somebody who did not understand how people could listen to a podcast, because you had to actually think when you're listening. So if you listen to music, it's a very passive thing. If you listen to a podcast, you actually have to think about what's being said. And I always felt that after a couple of minutes, my thoughts would wander. The podcast is running, and I'm thinking about something else. But I upskilled to learn how to do a podcast thanks to COVID. I was sitting at home. I had I started by doing it by recording it on the phone and speaking to people across the world. But now I have a full podcast set up at home. So that's a small upskilling I did. But also, in the past 2 years, my role has changed to look at something which is very big in the media industry now, which is the subscription business. We also call it reader revenue. I'm looking at that. So that means that I'm now spending some time looking at YouTube videos trying to figure out Excel sheets. Because I also come from a statistics background and all, but that's the Excel sheet era. But now I'm figuring out formulas like how to find the interest rate, how to find growth, things like that. But the upskilling that we all talk about, and in media, if you see, it's actually a 300-year-old industry of running newspapers. It's pretty much hasn't changed, and I keep telling people, you don't realize the newspaper comes in the morning. The newspaper comes in the morning because that was how it was done in 1700s. You really, why else do you want to associate readership in 2022 to an early morning behavior, right? So as people stop reading newspapers, or as the younger generations who don't have a connect to the newspapers start becoming paying customers, they really don't need to read in the morning, right? Because that is because you had a print cycle which had to print when people were sleeping so that you could give it in the morning. But people are reading till they go to sleep, or even if they take a loo break, let's say at 3 a.m., they may be reading on the phone, right? So you really don't have to tell them to read again early in the morning. So there are a lot of things that are changing, and one very important thing in the news industry which indicates all of this is data, right? And there is so much data out there, so I've been a print journalist for 15 years. There was absolutely no data available. The only data you would hear about being discussed is circulation figures. There is absolutely no data. Even now, if you look at print, technically there is no data available, right? You don't know what people are reading. Your circulation is this much, but how many people are actually reading the paper? Which pages are they going through? You have no data. But when you come to online, everything is data. You know exactly which word they stopped at if you want, right? You have all of that. In fact, I recently heard of a technology coming out of a company in Canada which can lay out an entire newspaper without a single designer, because it knows exactly where each kind of news item gets read. And it's just taken eyeball data for years. So even newspaper industry, which is not based on data, is now getting into data. And I think in journalism, where people were so hung up about words, we still are, numbers are also becoming very important. And that the power of data is, I think, the upskilling everybody in the journalism field and the media field needs to start getting into.
I think this is the great time. Today it is happening. One is the Industry 4.0, I think, is something which is a given. I think it's already in the place. But I think what has equally changed is the coming of the pandemic. has brought about a change, you know, and a lot of companies and situations have leveraged it to evolve to a new business system and a new way of working. I think there is a couple of points I will leave behind for everybody to, you know, to just ponder over it. I think one is that the hybrid system of working is a given. I think companies have to master the art. I think if companies are believing that all employees are going to come all days to the office, I think they're living in a fool's paradise. I think they better recognize fast this is not going to happen. Employees have adjusted. 2 years is a long period. Employees have adjusted. So I think one thing which is very, very clear is that Industry 4.0 plus the coming of the pandemic has brought a new way of working, and I think both employees and employers are having to adopt to a new way of working. I think that's one thing which is given. I believe that Industry 4.0 initially, through a lot of challenges, that so much of information and data was available to everybody. You know, I'll just take a small example and I'll come to you. I think it was, 2019 or maybe 18, I'd gone to give a small talk in an institute in Gurgaon. And there were about 40, 50 students, you know, sitting out there. And I was speaking, one guy had opened the laptop and he was checking what I was telling in the class. I said, don't worry, you can study, you can go in the laptop and check what I'm saying is truth, or after session we'll have time to interact and you can still ask. My point coming is that so much information available, people may feel scared. You know, I have a candidate coming for the interview, probably more knowledgeable about me as a company and so on. But I think you can turn it to its advantage. That if so much information is available, and if I can navigate it, then can it be an advantage to me? So things like employer branding, things about what do I talk about my company, talk about advocacy, talk about what I want to do. If I can leverage the internet and if I can leverage that media, a lot of my job is already done. And I need to focus on only smaller parts which are critical in the game. So I would say be well prepared that information is no longer my power of strength. It's not going to be always my source of power. But how I want to use that, how I want to leverage it to my advantage is, I think, where you need critical thinking skills, where you need how you're going to use communication, how you want to manage it to your advantage is, I think, where you have to spend your time.